My name is Charles, and if you saw me today, you might say I'm just another quiet widower sitting in a modest house in rural Kentucky. But tell me something. You've already been erased from the life of someone you created with your own hands. And on top of that, did you receive the bill to pay for the party? Well, that's what my own son did to me. It's not easy to understand how someone who grew up in your lap has the courage to exclude you from the most important day of his life, and still charge you as if you were any sponsor. I know that there are a lot of people who hear this and think, this doesn't make sense. And that's exactly why I decided to tell you everything. Because I'm not the only one. I know there are fathers and mothers out there, silently, swallowing humiliation as if it were part of life. But it doesn't have to be. Today, you will hear what I never told anyone. You'll find out what really happened when I received that envelope. And like an old man tired, it can still teach a lesson that not even money can erase. Because there are things that are not charged, and there are absences that speak louder than any scream. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. I am not a man to fight, nor to make a scandal. I've always been the type to swallow hard, take a deep breath and move on. But that day, that envelope, it was different. My son banned me from his own marriage, and as if that wasn't enough, he sent me a charge of $80,000. $80,000. And along came a note, be grateful for being able to contribute. That crossed me. I was not invited. I was not consulted. But he had to pay for everything. The luxurious mansion in the Tennessee countryside, the imported flowers, the honeymoon in the Maldives. And you know what's worse? They didn't even expect me to question it. But I questioned it. Not with shouting, but with action. And it all started with a call. A single call that would change everything. If you've ever felt that someone you raised with love discarded you like a burden, stay with me. If this story touches on any memory of yours, support me by leaving your subscription. Because this is not just my story. It is the story of many people who gave everything, and even so, were treated as nothing. And today I decided to tell you. Because there is silence that is also a scream. That morning the sky was clear, but the air already had that smell of autumn that reminded me of the times when Elena planted chrysanthemums in the front yard. I had just swept the dry leaves off the porch when I noticed the envelope in the mailbox. It was thick, firm paper, cream-colored, with the name Charles D. Miller written by hand, in a handwriting I knew well. Kevin always had this precise, almost cold handwriting. At that moment my heart beat faster. It was the invitation, I thought. After so many months of silence, perhaps he had rethought. Perhaps he had included me. I took the envelope to the kitchen with sweaty hands. I sat at the wooden table I've used for decades, the one Elena picked out on a promotion day at the furniture store on Main Street. I remember to this day. It's solid, Charles. It will last beyond us. And it really did. I put on my glasses, took a deep breath, and opened the envelope carefully, as if it were a letter of reconciliation. But what slipped inside was not an invitation. It was an account. Spreadsheets, budgets, contracts, everything is well organized. Cold, a total at the bottom, $80,000, $60,000 for the place in the buffet, the rest for photographer, decoration, band, and the so-called immersive experience at the hotel in the Maldives. And attached at the end of the last page a handwritten note. I recognized the tone before I even finished reading. Consider this your contribution. After all, you only got in the way of our family. Be grateful that you can help now. I read that more than once. With each reading, the sentence seemed more cutting. My fingers began to tremble. I rested my hands on the edge of the table so as not to collapse. The house fell silent. Not even the wall clock dared to make a noise at that moment. It was as if time had stopped to let me feel. And I felt it. A blow to the chest, one of those that don't leave a mark on the outside but break everything on the inside. At that moment, it wasn't just the gift that hurt me. It was the entire past. Every extra hour I worked, even after retirement. Every night I turned alone, taking care of him after Elena was gone. Every food I cooked, waiting for him to show up on Sunday. All that passed like a movie behind my eyes. And I, sitting in that chair with an open envelope, realized that for him, I was just that, a pocket. Maybe you, who are listening to me, have already felt something similar. That feeling of being discarded, as if all the love you gave had expired. It is a cold that does not come from the climate but from within. If this has ever happened to you, if this pain has touched you in any way, he comments below with a, "I've lived it." Or, it's true. Because sometimes knowing that we are not the only one to feel this way, it is already a consolation. After standing there for a while, I slowly folded the sheets and placed them on the table, aligned. I stared at the paper as if it could give me some answer. But only one question came. At what point did my son stop seeing me as a father and started to see me as an obstacle? The kitchen, which has always been the heart of my home, seemed smaller at that moment. The smell of old coffee in the air, the radio off, the picture frames staring at me from the shelf as silent witnesses of my pain. I got up slowly. My knees complained, but not as much as my chest. I went to the living room and took an old photo. Kevin must have been about 7 years old. We were at Jacobson Park, him in his dirty baseball uniform, smiling without his front teeth. I was crouching next to him, hand on shoulder. He looked at me as if I were his hero. That boy trusted me with his life. Where did I lose him? I sat in the armchair and stayed there, quiet, only with the photo in his hands. The light of the late morning came in through the cracks in the shutter. I could hear the cars passing by outside, life going on as normal. But inside my house, inside me, something had changed. An old wound had opened. Only this time, she was not going to heal with silence. It was at that moment that I understood. I needed to do something, not out of revenge, not even to prove anything, but to show before you die that love also has a limit, that respect is not a favor, it is an obligation, and that even the quietest man, when too injured, he learns to speak, even if it is without words. And that's when I remembered something, an old conversation, a single connection, something that could turn the key to everything. But what exactly did I discover that day? And why did that memory, forgotten for years, rekindle a flame that I didn't even know still existed? In the next excerpt, I'll tell you. And maybe you'll understand why the worst betrayal, it is always the one that comes from those we created. I remember it as if it were now. Kevin was about 8 years old. It was a Saturday morning, and the baseball field near the school was full of fathers, mothers, and children running everywhere. Elena was beautiful that day, with her hair up and that blue blouse that she only wore on special days. We sat in the bleachers with a little blanket, and I remember that she held my arm and said quietly, "Our boy is good. He will go far." And it was, at least as far as career, money, status. But at that time, he just wanted me to watch when he hit the ball. Is that it? And I looked. Every time. I was the one who woke up early, who fixed the uniform, who made the snack, and who ran to the field with the camera in my hands. I did everything I could. But that morning when I received that envelope, all this came back as if it were yesterday, and as if nothing had been valid. After Elena left, nothing was easy. Her cancer appeared suddenly, and when we found out, it was too late. I sold the car, then I sold the vacations that we had saved for years, then we mortgaged the house. I remember the day I signed those papers at the bank with my hand shaking. Everything for her to have a little more time with us. Kevin was in college. Little came, but it came. And at the funeral, he hugged me quickly, looked me in the eye and said, "You should have done more, Dad." I never forgot it. I had just buried the woman of my life, and my own son blamed me for her death. Those words broke me in a way that not even time has fixed. We never talked about it again. He returned to California, and from then on our conversations were limited to dry messages and bank transfers. A few years later, one Christmas, I decided to prepare tamales. The recipe was Elena's. I spent 2 days cooking, rolling in the corn leaf as she did. I bought a bottle of good wine, put on a dress shirt, and went to his apartment in downtown Lexington. I knocked on the door with my heart beating like a drum. It was Christmas after all. The first thing I noticed was Victoria's look. She barely smiled. Kevin picked up the tamales like a box and said, "Dad, we've gone vegan now. And next time, let me know before you come." Next time? Not even that time had worked. I stood in the middle of the room while they looked at each other, uncomfortable as if I were a stranger, as if my smell, my clothes, my food were something out of this world. I left without eating, with the bottle of wine under my arm, and spent the night at home alone, eating the cold tamales in front of the fireplace. And yet, even so, I continued to help when he asked. These memories come like a razor. They cut without making noise. We think we've forgotten, that we've overcome it, but it's a lie. When I read that note saying that I messed up the family, Everything came back with a force that took my breath away. But this time it was different, because along with the pain, there was a clarity, a coldness that I had never felt before. I saw for the first time the size of the manipulation I accepted, for love, for fear of losing the last tie I had left. And I understood that my silence only served to give more space for ingratitude to grow. I spent the whole night awake, with the house in the dark, listening only to the ticking of Elena's old clock, the one with the golden hand that we inherited from her mother. And there in that armchair I knew that it was no longer possible to be the father who lowers his head. I could no longer accept an invisible place in the life of someone I created. The pain became fuel. The envelope, which came as a humiliation, turned into a key. And I decided that before that wedding happened, a lot was still going to change. But how could an old and lonely man reverse so much coldness, so much distance? The answer came from a forgotten name, buried in the past, and an old friendship that time has not erased. I wonder what I found in that unexpected reunion, and why did that ignite the first spark of what would become my silent plan of justice? In the next excerpt, I'll tell you. And it all starts with a visit to the past. Those were days when time seemed to weigh more than pass. I woke up early, as I always did, but I sat on the edge of the bed, with my elbows on my knees and my head down. The whole house seemed too quiet, as if even the walls were in mourning. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't listen to the radio. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't even look at the messages that appeared on the screen. I moved slowly, walking around the house with that weight on my chest that no one sees, but that bends the spine. He took the broom, swept the clean floor. He washed the same cup 3 times. I repeated the same tasks as if trying to remember who I was before all this. Sometimes I stopped in the hallway in front of Kevin's room, the one I kept the same way even after he left. The band posters on the wall, the baseball trophies on the bookshelf, the bed made. It was as if a part of him still lived there, but now I knew it wasn't. He had moved not only from one city to another, but from within me. One night, I went to the attic. I took the blue box where I keep the old photos. I sat on the living room floor with everything scattered around. Wedding photo with Elena, her laughing in that simple and elegant dress. Travel photo. Photo of Kevin as a child with his face dirty with chocolate. Photo of our old dog, Max, sleeping on the couch. There was so much life there, so much that we built with effort, with renunciation, with true love. All of this seemed to be worth nothing now. With each image, I silently asked, where did I go wrong? I tried for a while to believe that Kevin was deluded, that it was Victoria's influence of the world he now lives in, that world of appearance, of followers, of cold dinners and soulless beautiful words. But then, like someone who is slapped awake, my eyes went back to the note. That sentence there, dry, cruel, calculated. Consider this your contribution. Be grateful. It was not a distraction. It was not carelessness. It was a choice. It was contempt. That sentence was not written on impulse. It was written with intention. And that's when something inside me started to change. It wasn't anger, no. Anger is loud, blind. What was born there was different. It was silence with clarity, cold with firmness, a kind of pain that stops bleeding and turns into steel. I stopped eating right. The coffee cooled in the cup. The food on the plate lost its taste before I even touched the fork. He slept in pieces, waking up every 2 hours with a heavy heart. The head kept coming back in that image. Kevin handing the ticket to someone, laughing in the corner with Victoria, while I was reduced to a pay line. And then, one night at dawn, sitting in the dark of the living room with the hallway light only half on, I understood. They took me out of the marriage, but they won't take away my dignity. Loneliness weighs, but it also teaches. He taught me that there are times in life when being silent is stronger than screaming. That silence can be a sword if you know where to cut. And there, in that house that had previously seemed empty, I began to draw a plan. Still nameless, formless, but with direction. I wasn't going to beg for anywhere. I wasn't going to justify anything. But he wasn't going to leave it cheap either. If they erased me from the party, I would show that some absences have more strength than any presence. And the first step of this started with a name that appeared out of nowhere in my head, as if it had been blown by Elena herself. A name I hadn't heard in years. A name that perhaps could help me show that behind so much luxury, There was a crack. But why did just that name come to my mind at that moment? And what did he mean, so many years later, to me and Kevin? In the next chapter, you will understand why a forgotten memory can become the beginning of a turn. And like an old man silent, he began to get up from where everyone thought he would no longer have the strength to leave. That morning, I opened my eyes even before the clock woke up. The sky was still dark, but I felt that the day had already begun for me. I got up slowly, made a very strong coffee, the kind that looks like a slap in the face, and sat down at the table. For the first time in days, I knew what I needed to do. I opened the folder where I kept the papers in that damn envelope. I organized it sheet by sheet. I looked at each value carefully, each item listed, as if I were reading a story about myself, written by someone who has never met me. And that's when I realized, if they think they've put me aside, it's because they don't know what a silent man is capable of. I took my old laptop, the same one I used to do the household bills when Elena was still with me. It took a long time to call. It made noise, choked a little, but it worked. I joined Victoria's social networks. Everything was public. Everything. A parade of ostentation. Photos with captions such as "Our fairy tale is coming." "Getting married in a historic property is a dream." All this is only possible because we have a family that supports us. Family? What family? I was erased from this story. My name was not in any post, no memory, no thanks. But my money. This one was present in every detail. On location in Franklin. In the dress signed by a famous designer. In the luxury suite in the Maldives. They wanted my pocket, but not my face. As I read all that, my stomach turned. It was like watching someone sell their own lie, with my sweat. And it was at this point that the decision was completely formed within me. I was going to act, but not in the way they expected. Not with fighting, not with shouting, not even lowering myself to their level. I was going to do it my way. Cold, silent, and accurate. I went back to the table, picked up the phone and called the number that appeared at the bottom of one of the contracts. The event companies. A polite man answered. He said his name was Brian, and that he was the wedding planner responsible for Kevin and Victoria's ceremony. I introduced myself only as Charles Miller. He asked if I was family. I replied, "Not anymore, but maybe I can still help." I asked for a meeting. He scheduled 2 days later in Nashville. I hung up the phone with heavy breathing like someone who closes a door that has no return. The plan began there, and in that instant, for the first time in a long time, I felt alive again. And look, I'm here opening my heart, telling a story that, for me, still bleeds inside. If you're listening, give me this support. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's not out of vanity, no. It's just because I still have a lot of stuff stored in here. And perhaps a part of it is yours too. That same night I reviewed the contracts, looked up information about the property in Franklin, looked at vendor names, outstanding payment dates. Everything was within my reach, and everything they hid under photos with filters. Now it began to dismantle itself with facts. I wasn't going to need to raise my voice. Just show what was hidden, and show it calmly, because what brings down is not scandal. It is the truth spoken at the right time. But what happened in that meeting with the wedding planner? And what did he unknowingly reveal to me that lit the next flame of my plan? Because, in that office full of artificial flowers and promises of perfection, I heard something that no parent expects to hear. And that's when it all started to fall apart brick by brick. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. I took a shower slowly, as if preparing for something big. I put on my gray flannel shirt, the one Elena always said made me look stronger. Dark pants, clean shoes. I looked in the mirror before leaving. There was an old man there, yes, with deep wrinkles and a tired look. But there was also someone who was no longer going to lower his head. I drove to Nashville in silence, straight road, cloudy sky. I remembered the path I took when I took Kevin to science competitions at school. The difference is that this time, I wasn't going to watch it. I was going to act. The office was in a mirrored, chic building full of well-dressed people coming and going with leather briefcases and the smell of expensive perfume. I went up to the 3rd floor, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell with the name, Mark Brennan Weddings and Events. A young receptionist, one of those who don't expect to see a man of my type there, looked at me surprised. I asked to speak to Mark himself. Within minutes he appeared with a trained smile. tight dress shirt and shoes that shone brighter than they should. "Mr. Miller, of course. What an honor to receive you. We were just waiting for the confirmation of some values." He extended his hand as if greeting an important customer. I squeezed tightly without smiling. Entered. The office was a showcase. Catalogs of open dresses, pictures of luxurious weddings, aromatic candles burning in a corner. He invited me to sit down and without wasting time began to speak. "Your son and Victoria have refined taste, I must say. The property in Franklin is wonderful. The floral decor will come straight from Charleston. And the suite in the Maldives? A true paradise. Everything is in progress. We just need a final confirmation from you to release the outstanding payments." He spoke with that artificial excitement of someone who is used to selling dreams at any price. I was silent, listening. I took my small notebook and wrote everything down, as I did in the old days, when I reviewed projects and budgets. Every supplier, every deadline, every clause. When he finished listing the values, he turned to me with expectation. "So, can we close today?" I closed the notebook, leaned my back against the chair and looked into his eyes for a few seconds. Then I said, in the calmest voice I had, "Just a question, Mark. Did you know that I wasn't invited to this wedding?" The air seemed to get heavy suddenly. His smile withered at the time. "What do you mean, not invited?" "I'm sorry, I assumed that—" I interrupted without changing my tone. "Yes, I didn't receive an invitation. I only received the bill, and a note saying I should be grateful for contributing." He swallowed. It was clear that he did not know what to say. Did I try to ease the embarrassment? No, it was not the time for that. I leaned forward a little. "Look, Mark, no payment will be authorized without my direct approval, and if any contract is processed using my name or any link to my account, I immediately call my family's attorney. Understood?" He nodded, now pale. "Yes, sir. Understood." I stood up, took my notebook and shook his hand again. "Have a nice day." And I left. In the elevator alone, I closed my eyes for a moment. It was not pleasure that I felt. It was a kind of hard peace, as if he had finally pulled the first piece of a castle that seemed immense, but that was supported by appearance. They had forgotten me, ignored me, belittled me, but what sustained all that, what made that party seem possible, was me. And now that I had touched the base, everything would start shaking. But what would Kevin say when he found out that the first payment was blocked? And what would happen when the family name appeared involved in a fraudulent contract? What's next? It's the sound of the structure starting to crack, and I was ready to hear every snap. In the days following that meeting with Mark Brennan, I came home with a sharper mind than ever. It was no longer just about the pain of being excluded. It was about something bigger, something dirtier, better planned. That $80,000 charge, it wasn't just an exaggeration of luxury. It was a scheme, and I needed to understand how all that was tied together. I went back to my old laptop, took the names listed on the budgets and started cross-checking the information. Name by name, company by company. Everything calmly. I was in no hurry. Those who were excluded from the invitation do not need to run to get anywhere. It was then that a name caught my eye. Lumina Travel Group. It was the agency responsible for organizing the honeymoon in the Maldives. But one detail struck me as odd. The tax address was the same as a wedding dress store in Knoxville that I remembered from the time Victoria and Kevin got engaged. I decided to pull the company's data, and there it was. The majority shareholder was a certain Hannah Westbrook. The surname was not strange to me. When I put it in the search engine, I found the confirmation. Victoria's sister. It was all her family. The money my son thought he was investing in a dream was in fact going back to the pockets of the future sister-in-law. I kept digging. I found out that the hired photographer was also not part of the main agency, the one Mark had mentioned. It was another budget, a parallel contract, an overpriced amount with weird clauses and signed, not by Kevin but by Victoria. There it was not just ostentation, it was manipulation. It was control. And my son, blinded by the image of the perfect bride, was being made a fool of, not by strangers, but for those who slept next to him every night. I sat down at the table again with everything printed and organized, a dossier, paper by paper, item by item. I wasn't gathering evidence just for myself. I wanted to show him, that boy I raised, that betrayal didn't just come from the outside, it came from within. He erased me from his life, yes, but he didn't see who was really writing this story behind his back. And it is in this part of the story that I need to tell you something. If you've made it this far, don't let go of my hand now. What's next? It is the point at which everything changes, because until then I only observed. But from now on, I start to act. And when a man like me, who has always been quiet, discreet, forgetful, decides to take the reins, things never go back to the way they were before. I took a black folder, the kind I used in my engineering days, and put all the documents inside. I looked at the name of each company, the account data, the contracts signed on the sly. It was like looking at a puzzle that finally fit. Victoria didn't just want a wedding. She wanted a perfect operation, a theater paid for with other people's money, and that would serve to promote her image on social networks. Kevin was just the main character, and I, the silent sponsor. But now, I had the real script in my hands. That same day, I printed a simple letter, direct, signed by me. There was no cursing. There was no emotional charge. Only the truth. And along with the letter, I put the complete dossier. I addressed Kevin's office in Palo Alto with acknowledgement of receipt. He didn't know it yet, but the curtain was about to fall. The question that kept hammering in my head after closing the envelope was, will he have the courage to face what I discovered? Or will he prefer to remain attached to the comfortable lie that was built for him? In the next part, you will see my son's reaction, and you will understand that some truths, when they arrive in the mail, can no longer be ignored. It took me a while to remember him, but when the name came, it came with force. Alex, Kevin's childhood best friend. They grew up together here in Lexington, played on the same team, slept at each other's houses, spent summers fishing on Lake Jacobson. Elena loved Alex. He always said that he had a good soul. After they grew up, each one went to one side, but I always followed it from afar. I learned that he became a private detective in Louisville, specializing in business fraud. A discreet, technical guy. Someone who never liked the spotlight. It was then that I thought, maybe it's him. Maybe it's with him that I can show, not only Kevin, but the whole world, the kind of lie they're about to celebrate with applause and champagne. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I had kept in an old notebook. I heard the call ring with a mixture of anxiety and hope. On the other side, his voice answered, "Hello?" I said my name, and he replied immediately, with surprise, "Mr. Charles? How long has it been, huh?" I made an appointment for coffee at a diner on 4th Street near the station. It was a simple place, but with strong and sincere coffee, just the way I like it. I arrived early. He arrived on time. The fuller beard, the hair a little gray, but the same attentive look. We shake hands like two men who respect the past. I told him everything, without hiding, from the ticket to the dossier. He listened to me without interrupting. At the end, he ran his hand over his chin, took a deep breath, and said, "Do you know what's most painful about all of this, Mr. Charles?" He erased me too. He cut me off from his life because one day I asked him to be honest in an interview. He said that I disturbed his image. He steps on those he helped to rise. I shook my head, feeling that bitter mixture of pain and recognition. It wasn't just me. Kevin had become a man who discarded those who no longer served him. It was then that I looked Alex in the eye and said, "I don't want scandal, I don't want revenge, but I want truth. I need evidence, recordings, images. I want this wedding to show who is who. I want my son to look down the aisle and see for the first time the structure he built crumbling." Alex was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. "Let's do it the right way. Cool, clean, and surgical. And it will hurt, but it will be necessary." That night we drove back together to the property in Franklin where the wedding was to take place. Alex had access to technology that I didn't even imagine. He installed discrete micro cameras at strategic points. The bride's studio, backstage kitchen, planning room, apps that recorded calls and captured audio in real time, all based on legal permissions. He was good at what he did, and I, who have always been an engineer, understood structure. We knew where to lay the foundation to bring down the building, and we did it in silence, accurately. I remember coming home that night and sitting on the porch. The sky was clear. A star only shone brighter in the left corner. Elena said she was the star of truth. She always shows up when someone needs to see what they're trying to hide. And that night, she shone for me. You know, sometimes life feels like punishment. It seems that the more we love, the more we get beaten. But there are times when love becomes strength. And strength, when it comes together with truth, changes everything. If you've ever felt this, even if only once in your life, comment here with a "it's true" or "I know how it is." Because this pain that we carry is not only ours, it echoes in many people who gave everything and was left behind. That morning, for the first time, I felt that I was no longer alone. And more than that the plan was not mine alone. It was of time, of justice that sometimes takes time, but it comes, and it comes unexpectedly. But what did those cameras start to record backstage at the perfect party? And what Kevin didn't know yet, but was you about to find out with a click of play? The truth was recording, and the next reveal, it was going to leave everything on the verge of collapse. It was on a cloudy afternoon, one of those in which the sky seems to weigh down the house, that the cell phone vibrated on the table. It was a known number, but one that almost never appeared. Kevin. My heart tightened in my chest, more out of fright than hope. I didn't answer. He didn't care to talk, and I already knew that if I had done it now, it wasn't out of nostalgia. A few minutes later, the notification arrived. Voice message. My finger was still on the play button for quite a while. The lit screen lit up my face in the dark of the room, but I hesitated, not because I was afraid of what I was going to hear, but because deep down, there was still that invisible thread of a father who waits, even after everything, to hear something different. I pressed play. His voice started calm, slurred, as if he were choosing the words well. Father, I heard that you were in the events company. I think there was a misunderstanding. Some roles were exchanged, and perhaps Victoria got confused when sending the documents. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I took a deep breath. For a moment, I almost believed it. Almost. But then the intonation changed. The voice became firm, sharp. But I want to make one thing very clear. If you don't pay this part, you'll regret it. Don't ruin the only important moment of my life. Don't throw my marriage in the trash. You have an obligation to be on our side even if you are not present. It was like getting punched without raising your hands. I sat there, listening to the silence that came after the audio. A part of me wanted to believe that it was just the desperation of an anxious child. But it wasn't. That tone was the same one I heard years ago at Elena's funeral. It was the tone of someone who no longer saw his father as a father, but as an obstacle, as an uncomfortable piece. That wasn't just demand. It was a threat. And I knew. The Kevin I raised, the boy who slept cuddling with me when he had nightmares, no longer existed. I felt a deep pain, but it wasn't fear. It was mourning, because there I buried within me the last illusion, the last image that remained of the two of us still together. Because it's one thing to be forgotten, it is another to be treated as an enemy. I forwarded the audio to Alex, without writing anything. He would respond in his own time, and he would know what to do with it. I, for my part, sat on the porch until the sun went down, watching the light slowly change as the shadows of the house stretched out on the floor. The cold wind touched my face, and I thought, how many times can a man be wounded by his own blood without becoming stone? But I didn't turn to stone. Not yet. Inside me, something did break, perhaps irreparably. But in place of the love that was forcibly torn away, something else was born. A sense of justice that was no longer just for me. It was for everything I represented, and that was erased. By Elena. For the memories they threw away. For the old man who everyone thought was only good for paying the bill quietly. And it was at that moment that I decided there would be no turning back. The plan would continue until the end. Because sometimes, to regain dignity, you must first lose everything that binds you to the illusion. But what would Alex do with that audio? And how would a simple voice file become the key piece to dismantle, once and for all, the farce that was about to be celebrated in high style? In the next chapter, you will see that even the best-dressed lie, when it is touched by the truth, begins to tremble and fall. It took me 2 days to get the courage and answer the call. He insisted with short, dry messages, one after the other. We need to talk. It's not as it seems. Dad, answer. Deep down, I knew he wasn't looking for reconciliation. I was trying to control it, but I needed to listen. And more than that, I needed to register. I took my old recorder, one of those small ones, which I used at the time of the work reports, and turned it on even before pressing the green of the call. When I answered, I left my voice neutral. Hello? Kevin replied with an artificial tone of relief. as if he were talking to a coworker he still needed convincing. "Dad? Thank you for answering, I was worried." I was silent for a moment. He continued, "Look, I know this all sounds wrong, but the truth is that Victoria exaggerated a little. This thing about the charge, it was misunderstood. I didn't know she was going to send it straight." I paused for a long time just for him to get lost in his own speech. "And about the wedding, well, it's not that we didn't want you there. It's just that it would be uncomfortable. You understand, right? With all the guests of the company, Victoria's family, his style doesn't fit. My style." He said it as if talking about an out-of-fashion piece of clothing. I took a deep breath. "So, Kevin, do you think it's fair to exclude me from your marriage and still send me the bill to pay for it?" The silence on the other end of the line was like a wave forming in the sea. First, that retreat. Then, the impact. He hesitated. And then, it exploded. "You owe me this. You owe me for everything you failed to do. Do you think you were a good father? After Mom died, you stuck in that silence. It left me alone, with my decisions, with my pain. You should be thankful that you can still contribute something." That last sentence fell like a stone on my chest. But I didn't react. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just let the tape recorder do its job. When he finished, my answer came clean, like cold water on a hot morning. "Kevin, if you ever want to talk like a child, really, I'll be around here. But until then, between us, there's nothing else." He hung up. Without saying goodbye, I held the phone in my hand for a few seconds, listening to the noise of silence once again. Then I pressed the recorder button and saved the file with a simple name. Conversation, October 11th. I didn't cry that night. I didn't even tremble. I just went to the back of the closet and took the box where I keep memories that no one sees. Inside was an old letter from Elena, handwritten in her delicate handwriting. At one point she said, "If one day our son walks away, be firm. He's going to need you more than he thinks, even if I never admit it." There, I understood that my firmness now, it was love. A kind of love that does not please but that protects. Protects even when you need to get away. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Because sometimes, telling this story is not just for me. It is for those who have never had the chance to tell theirs. The next day I took the recording to Alex. He listened to everything carefully. When he finished, he looked up and said, "This is going to be the turning point." He was right. Because in that audio, there was no longer a mask. He only had the portrait of a wounded ego, of blind pride, of a man who forgot where he came from, and who held the ladder as he climbed. But what did Alex plan with that recording in his hands? And how would this small voice file become the quietest and most powerful weapon a father has ever used to defend what was left of his dignity? In the next part, you will understand that the truth, when well documented, does not need to scream. It just needs to be heard. And the right time was coming. I remember well the day when silence began to work for me. It was funny. After the recorded conversation, after I told him that, until I talked like a son, there was nothing left between us. I just stopped. I stopped responding, I stopped chasing, I stopped trying to fix what he himself had broken. And while I was retreating like an old man who closes the door to protect what is still left, on the other side his house began to catch fire. Not literally, of course, but emotionally, socially, financially, and all of this came to me through Alex's hands. He came here at home at night, always with that serious look and a folder full of prints, audios, images from the cameras he installed on the property there in Tennessee. The first thing he showed me was an exchange of emails from the suppliers. Payment pending. Contract will be canceled within 48 hours. Passing on the date to another customer. We cannot maintain the reserve without the second installment. They looked like small cracks, the kind you see on a wall and think you can ignore, until he realizes that the whole house is giving way. The Franklin estate called Kevin 3 times in a row. When he didn't answer, they called Victoria. Alex got the audio of the last call. The management lady said, with all possible elegance, that without the rest of the deposit they could not guarantee either the external ceremony or the suites reserved for the godparents. I heard Victoria swallowing hard, trying to keep her voice steady. There has to be a mistake. My fiancé has already settled this with his father. Deceit. I repeated this in a low voice when I heard the audio, sitting there in my kitchen, as if I were a walking wallet. a cog in a gear that I never chose to participate in. With all this chaos, the tension between the two began to explode. Alex showed me a video captured by the cameras. It was Kevin, in the parking lot of the flower shop, yelling at a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. "Do you know who I am?" he bellowed, pointing his finger in the boy's face as if that opened doors. The boy did not back down. I just said, with all the calmness in the world, that without payment there was no delivery, no assembly, no flowers. Kevin kicked a box and left in a huff. I watched that scene 3 times, not for pleasure, but by a kind of bitter confirmation, that certainty that hurts more than it relieves. My son, the boy I taught to tie his shoe, has become a man who tries to buy respect by shouting, and when the money disappears, the world ceases to bow down. Victoria also began to lose control. The video showed her crying in the fitting room, complaining that everything was going down the drain because the old man didn't pay. It was not sadness. It was desperation of those who saw the mask begin to crack. And it was in this part of the story, when I saw her reaction, that a phrase crossed me like a revelation. Sometimes life lets everything fall apart just to show who was really holding the walls all along. And look, if you feel this in any corner of your life, no matter how small, stay with me until the end. Because what comes after this fall changes everything. In another video, Kevin tried to negotiate with the buffet. The manager patiently explained that the food was already being redirected to another event. He tried to impose his voice, but no one complied. "I'm going to make a formal complaint. I'm a VIP customer." The manager just replied, "VIP customers pay on time, sir." I almost smiled when I heard that, not out of malice, but because, for the first time, he found a limit, a world that has not bowed. The guests began to notice something strange as well. Alex managed to capture bits and pieces of conversation, people saying that the wedding was badly managed, that it all seemed improvised, that it was weird that Kevin didn't mention his father. One woman said, "If he treats his own father like that, imagine the rest." I listened to this excerpt sitting in the armchair in the living room, looking at Elena's portrait. It gave me a squeeze. Maybe she was watching it from above. Maybe she was saying quietly, "Now he's going to learn." I don't know, but it was the first time in a long time that I felt a little peace. Kevin, totally lost, started sending desperate messages to the planner, to the property manager, to suppliers who no longer remembered who he was. And in all this, he did not yet know that he was being watched, documented. Every scream, every threat, every attempt to hide the truth. Everything saved. You're all set. The fall of the castle was not just beginning. It was already past the halfway point. And as I watched every bit of this collapse happen, one question kept hammering inside me. When he finds out that all this was no accident, but consequence, and even more, how will he react when he realizes that someone he thought was weak? Was it precisely the one who pulled the first thread that made the entire tapestry fall apart? Because the next thing that happened completely changed the course of this story, and I'll tell you, but only if you are prepared to see what happens when the truth knocks on the door of those who do not know how to deal with it. It started on one of those ordinary days when I just wanted to buy fresh bread and go home in silence, but it was enough for me to enter the market around the corner to realize that something in the air had changed. People didn't talk to me directly, but I saw the eyes crossing, stopping a second longer, whispering too low to be a conversation and loud enough for me to understand that the subject had a name and a surname. Kevin. I grabbed a basket and walked through the aisles, trying to pretend I didn't notice anything. But as I passed near the fruit section, I heard 2 ladies commenting, "It was that boy from the wedding. It seems that he humiliated a delivery man there at the flower shop." Another murmured, "They say his father has moved away. Now you can understand why." I can't explain what I felt. It was not revenge. It was not satisfaction. It was a burden, slowly coming out of the chest, as if I had finally stopped carrying alone a truth that had been with me for years. When I left the market, I found Mrs. Martha moving her plants, as she always did in the late afternoon. She saw me, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Mr. Charles, I heard some things about Kevin. I don't know if it's true, but they say he had a fight with a delivery man. He screamed, cursed, all because of marriage." I kept quiet, looking at the floor. She put her hand on my arm affectionately. "No one deserves to go through this, especially coming from a child." Her voice was so sincere that I had to take a deep breath before answering. I just said, "Life shows, Mrs. Martha. 1 hour shows. Later, Mr. Ellis called me from the gate. He was never one to beat around the bush. "I saw Kevin yesterday," he said. "He treated an employee of the printing company as if he were garbage. The boy left crying. I never thought he would have that kind of behavior." He shook his head, disappointed indeed, like someone who had seen a boy grow up and now witnessed his worst side come to the surface. I stood there looking at the asphalt, feeling that bitter sweetness, because no one likes to hear bad things about their own child. But at the same time, there was a part of me that thought, finally, the world is seeing what I carried quietly. The truth is that appearances are short-lived when the essence begins to scream. And Kevin built his entire life on image, beautiful photos, perfect speeches, impeccable posture on the networks, that rehearsed way of a winning professional. But the facade, when it finds the first crack, breaks like thin glass, and that's what started to happen. With each comment, each report, each crossed look, it was as if his mask was falling off by itself. I didn't need to point out. I didn't need to expose anything. His attitudes did the job. There was a time while I was returning home with the bags in my hands, when I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and stared at the sky, half cloudy, half blue, that indecisive late afternoon, and I thought about how some memories stick to us forever. I remembered little Kevin running down the street with his knees scraped and a silly smile, calling, "Dad, look at me," as if the whole world depended on my approval. It's strange how life changes. Like the same footsteps that once ran towards us, now they cross us without looking back. And if you've ever felt it, this mixture of good memory with present pain, share in the comments some memory that marked you. It may be simple, small, but it was stored. I like to read these things. It makes me feel less alone. At the end of that day, I sat in my armchair, with the already warm cup of coffee in my hands, and watched through the window. The quiet street, the lights of the houses turning on, and I was there, realizing something I hadn't felt for a long time. I was no longer alone. Because even without saying a word, people began to see. It wasn't about destroying my son. God knows that was never my desire. It was about revealing the truth, a truth that he himself built and now would need to face. And the more this story spread, but I felt that something important was about to happen, because his moral downfall, it was not yet the final fall, and what came soon after, I never imagined I would see with my own eyes. The storm that night seemed to want to rip off the roof of my house. The wind hit the windows like someone asking to enter, insistent, restless, and maybe that's why I couldn't sleep. I kept walking around the room, touching the old furniture, the picture frames, the small objects that Elena chose so carefully when we were still building our lives together, until my eyes fell on a wooden box stored in the back of the closet, a box I had avoided for almost 10 years. I knew exactly what was inside, but I never had the courage to pull over. That night, however, something called me. Maybe it was the noise of the rain. Maybe it was the weight of the week. Maybe it was the fact that I was so tired of carrying silence. I picked up the box slowly, as if holding a living thing, and placed it on the table. I smelled it, old wood and time, and when I opened it, I found exactly what I had imagined. The letter the nurse gave me on the day I lost Elena, a letter that I never opened. Not because I didn't want to read it, but because I didn't know if I would survive her words. The handwriting was hers, round, soft, the way that always made me see goodness even in what hurt. I sat on the chair, breathed like someone diving, and finally opened it. "My love, if you are reading this letter, I am no longer there with you. But no, I saw everything. I saw you steady when I faltered. I saw you sell what you loved to give me more time. I saw you blame yourself for things that weren't anyone's fault. I don't want the world to treat you like a shadow. You're the anchor of it all, Charles. Never let anyone erase you." I stopped there. I couldn't continue for a few seconds. Her handwriting seemed to light up the surrounding walls. It was like hearing her voice for the last time, like feeling the light touch on my shoulder as I cooked, like the comfortable silence of the nights when it was just the two of us, sharing the same blanket. The rain was hitting the roof, but the sound was no longer from the wind. It was from memory. I keep reading. "Take care of Kevin, but don't let the love you feel for him become an excuse to give up yourself. He is good, but he can get lost along the way. And if he ever forgets who you are, remember you. Remember our history. Remember what we built. No one erases what is true." When I closed the letter, I was different. Not sad, that I had been for far too long. It was something else. A force that I had forgotten about myself. Elena has always been like that. Even sick, even weak. She could see far. She knew Kevin could grow too fast and lose his roots. She knew that because I loved too much, I sometimes accepted less than I deserved. And there, in that letter written with trembling hands, she left me a reminder that I could no longer ignore. It wasn't revenge what I was doing. It was not spite, nor accumulated anger. It was honor. It was respect. Respect for the life I built alongside her. Respect for the father I was. Respect for the man I strove to be, even when no one was looking. I folded the letter carefully and held it to my chest. It was the first time in many years that I cried without feeling ashamed. I cried quietly as I always did, but this time it didn't hurt. It was like washing the soul. I looked out the window. The lightning lit up the street. The rain was falling, but inside I felt clear, steadfast. For the first time I understood that this path I had chosen, to show the silent truth, to expose what was hidden, was not just about marriage. It wasn't just about the $80,000. It was about not allowing the story I built with my calloused hands to be reduced to nothing. It was about making sure that Elena's memory wasn't spat out, that her sacrifice and mine wasn't turned into a narrative of convenience. It was about leaving a mark somewhere in the world that I existed, that our family existed, and that I would not be erased from the life I helped to build. That night I swore to myself, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how much it bleeds, I'm going to go all the way. Not to destroy Kevin, but so that he has the chance, and perhaps the only one, to see who he has become. Because sometimes the worst blindness is the one that the person chooses to use. I closed the letter, put it back in the box, and placed it near the head of my bed. The storm was still outside, but inside me, she had finally passed. But that same night, while I was trying to sleep, something happened outside my house. A movement. A car that shouldn't be there. A shadow that was not common. And the next day when I woke up, I found out that this silent visit would completely change the course of the fall that was already underway. And that's what I'm going to tell you in the next part. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I found on my porch that morning. I woke up before the sun on that Saturday, the day that was supposed to be my son's perfect day, in his words. I sat on the edge of the bed with Elena's letter still on the next table and stared at my hands for a while. Hands that already held Kevin when he took his first steps. Hands that dug, built, raised everything he had as a base. And now it was the same hands that in silence were about to let the world show who he had truly become. I prepared my coffee slowly, that strong smell filling the kitchen as it always did on difficult mornings. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't put on music. I just stood there listening to the clock on the wall ticking every second, as if the whole house knew something big was about to happen. The cell phone vibrated at 7 in the morning. A photo of Alex. Then another. And another. The first showed 2 trucks of suppliers closing their doors, with the logo of a chic buffet service stamped on the bodywork. The caption he wrote read, "Going away. Payment has not fallen." The second image showed a white tent being dismantled by 3 employees of the property, the tarpaulins already wet with dew. The third, that third one hurt more than I realized. It was the big gold K&V sign being taken back to the home decor company's truck, the symbol of the dream wedding going away before it even begins. I took a deep breath, not for joy, but because in that instant I felt the exact weight of what the truth can do when it finally finds the right path. At 8:30, more photos. The main hall empty, chairs stacked, the string quartet collecting instruments. A short message from Alex. They won't ring without payment. Outside, guests began to arrive, impeccably dressed, neat hair, trained smiles. But all they found was a wet parking lot and disoriented staff. A bridesmaid, dressed in that green that Victoria so much wanted to combine with the flowers, posted a photo on social media. "Where's the wedding? I've been waiting for 40 minutes. The comments multiplied faster than summer rain. "What do you mean? Nobody warns anything? Are these people really organized?" Until a distant cousin of theirs wrote, "I heard it's a payment problem." The lie that they had built with so much effort began to crack there, in the middle of the property's parking lot, in front of 40, 50, maybe 100 people. I sat in my armchair, watching the phone vibrate nonstop. He doesn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. Because when justice is really fair, it doesn't need a party, it just needs to happen. At 9:40, Kevin's number appeared on the screen. Call, then another, then another. I refused all of them. When he realized that I would not answer, the audios began, some pleading, others trying to maintain their posture, and some with that same aggressiveness that I already knew so well. Dad, please answer. You can solve it. This is Victoria's thing, but we fix it later. It only helps me now. You're going to screw up. Why are you doing this to me? I let each one in and out of my cell phone without touching anything, like leaves blown by the wind. At 10:30, Alex sent me another video. Victoria in the corner of the reception, hands on her face, crying, while two bridesmaids tried to console her. Behind her, the wedding planner was talking to someone on the phone, pacing back and forth with his face completely tense. Minutes later, the property sent a general statement to guests. For unforeseen logistical reasons, this morning's event has been postponed. We apologize for the inconvenience. Postponed. The most elegant word they found for a collapse. On social media, Victoria tried to maintain the pose. He posted an old photo from months ago, with the caption, "Unforeseen events happen. Gratitude for your patience." But the comments were not forgiving. But what unforeseen events? I'm here in the parking lot, nothing happened. Is it true that they didn't pay for the space? The public mask, chosen with so much care, began to fall for all to see. The world that erased me, falling apart without me having to move a finger. And silence. My silence was the greatest answer. I didn't block Kevin. I didn't answer. I didn't give an explanation. Silence was my border, my last protection. At 11:10, he sent the last audio of the day. The broken voice between anger and despair. "Father, please answer me, I need you." And for the first time in a long time, that sentence didn't hurt me. Because for the first time, it was true. I pressed the phone to my palm, took a deep breath, and thought, what comes now can change everything. But I need to be ready, because the day wasn't over yet. And what happened a few hours later? It made the wedding storm look like a timid drizzle next to what was about to knock on my door. The storm that night seemed even worse than the one in Elena's letter. Long thunder, the kind that makes the house shake slowly, as if everything around was breathing heavily. I was sitting in the armchair, with no light on, just listening to the wind blowing on the windows when I heard 3 loud knocks on the door. They were not the knocks of those who visit, they were the knocks of those who beg. I stood up slowly, my joints complaining as always, and when I opened a crack, the dim light of the hallway illuminated something I didn't expect to see. Kevin, soaking wet, completely lost, with his hair sticking to his forehead, and his eyes sunken, as if the arrogance had flowed with the rain. Behind him, almost hidden, was Victoria, hugging her own body, her expensive dress glued to her legs, her makeup smudged like melted paint. "Dad, please, we need to talk." His voice was no longer the voice of the executive who sent proud messages. It was the voice of a boy who found the wall where all the excuses ended. I opened the door, not too much, just enough for them to enter the shelter of the porch. The rain ran from their foreheads to the ground, forming small rivers. Kevin took a deep breath, shaking. Everything went wrong. Everything. The vendors left. The property canceled everything. The guests complained. Some left in front of us. "Father, help me. I don't know what to do." He looked at me as if I had the world's solution, as if I were the same father he ignored, blocked, humiliated. I stood there watching. The contrast was so great that for a second I wondered if that was really my son. Victoria tried to speak, but her voice came out cracking, almost a whisper. We just wanted it to be perfect." And then, as if the truth had been growing inside her, she added, "It was my idea. I said that you would not fit the photos, the guests, the standard, but I didn't know it was going to happen like this." She hid her face in her hands, trembling. Kevin turned to her as if seeking support, but she was just as broken as he was. When he turned his gaze to me, he said, "I just wanted to impress. I didn't think straight." Those words, "I didn't think," were like a thin blade. Because he thought so. He thought I was disposable. He just didn't think that the world wasn't going to bend the way he expected. I took a deep breath. The raindrops dripped from his coat onto my old carpet, forming a small, dark circle on the floor. And it was then that I asked, with all the calmness that life has taught me to have, "Kevin, if I had paid for everything, if I had sent the money without complaining, Would you have invited me today? He swallowed. He looked down, then to the side, then to me, and he did not answer. His silence said it all. He didn't need anything else, nor justification, nor of request, nor forgiveness. The truth was there, wide open in the rain and in the defeated look. I felt a deep tiredness, but a gentle tiredness, as someone who finally understands that he cannot carry another life on his back. And with the calm that only those who have suffered a lot can have, I said, "You have a lifetime to learn this. This lesson is not mine. It's yours." Kevin tried to step forward, as if he wanted to hold my hand, but I backed off. Not out of anger, but for protection. I had already lost too much to deliver the rest now. I tapped the door slowly and just said, "Go home. Take care of yourselves." And I closed it. The sound of wood fitting into the jamb felt like the end of an era. Outside, I heard Victoria's restrained sob. I heard Kevin say my name one last time, weak, almost out of breath, then heavy footsteps down the stairs, and the engine of a car that was hard to start. I stood there with my hand still resting on the door, breathing slowly. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So if you can, enjoy this video and subscribe, because this story still needs to reach someone else who is going through something similar. I sat back in the armchair and closed my eyes, because I knew that visit was not the end. It was just the beginning of the reckoning. And what happened the next day? It changed everything again, in a way that even I didn't expect, even with all my life experience. In the days that followed that night at the door, I imagined that silence would take over my routine again, as it always did, as I always knew how to do. But for the first time in many years, that's not what happened. The very next morning, when I was still preparing my coffee, the landline rang. I almost dropped the cup in fright because that device was more mute than a church closed during the week. I answered cautiously. It was Pastor Jones from the church Elena and I attended before her illness worsened. His voice was firm but soft. "Brother Charles, I hearken, and I want you to know that I admire your attitude. Nowadays, many people forget what dignity is." I stood still, holding the phone with my left hand and my chest with my right, because it hit me in a place I thought was dead. After hanging up, I sat down at the table and let the coffee cool. Not out of sadness, but out of gratitude, a kind of gratitude that we feel so deep that we need silence to accommodate. These calls began to become routine. A former colleague from the engineering company called me just to say, "I heard about what your son did, and what you did too. I don't know if I would have the same courage." Another neighbor here in the neighborhood said he saw the comments about the wedding on Facebook and said, "You have always been a correct man. Now everyone is seeing that." I didn't seek validation from anyone, but I confess, after spending so many years being treated like dead weight by my own son, hearing that rekindled something inside me, as if the world had suddenly remembered that I existed, and that I had value. In the late afternoon, I heard light knocking at the gate. It was Miss Martha, huddled inside a plaid coat holding a steaming apple pie. She smiled when she saw me. "I made this pie earlier today. I thought you might want a piece." I accepted, but before I could thank her, she put her hand on my arm and said, "Mr. Charles, I know you don't like to comment on these things, but you were strong, stronger than many around here, and I wanted you to know that we are with you." That phrase entered me like a warm blanket on a winter's day. After she left, I stared at the pie for a few minutes, smelling the smell of cinnamon mixed with memories. It had been a long time since someone offered me something out of pure affection, without asking for anything in return. The next day, Mr. Ellis showed up with a pot of white paint in his hands. "I came here to see if you want help to paint this fence. You need it, see?" I laughed for the first time in weeks. "It really is, Ellis, but why so much goodwill?" He shrugged in that kind of rough but sincere way. "Because you deserve it. And because, when we realize that someone has been treated unfairly, we try to balance the scales the way we can." He stayed there for a few hours talking to me about simple things, the garden, the weather, the new neighbors, and I thanked him, not for the paint, but for the company. At the end of that same day, Alex appeared by surprise. He has always been a discreet boy, but this time he knocked on my door as if bringing important news. In his hands, a black USB stick. "Here's everything, Charles. Videos, photos, audios, contracts, everything organized. I don't think you'll need to use it, but it's here if you want to keep it." He gave me as someone who hands over a piece of his own truth, solid, Documented. Undeniable. I picked up the USB stick and felt the weight of it, not physical, but moral. That was the whole story. Not only what Kevin did to me, but what Kevin did to himself. I squeezed Alex's shoulder. "Thank you, my son." He lowered his head, moved. "I owed it to you." I kept the USB stick inside the same box where Elena's letter was. Two different truths. One that built me, another that protected me. And at that moment, looking at the closed box, I understood something that touched me in a way that I can't explain. Sometimes life takes everything away, but it returns it in the form of people. People who show up without asking permission. People who see you when you spent years thinking you were invisible. And if you've ever experienced something like this, if you've ever felt the world lift you up a little after knocking you down too much, it remains with me until the end. Because the most remarkable moment in this story is yet to come. I went to sleep that night, not with sadness, not with anger, but with a strange sense of belonging, as if I had returned to occupy a place in the community that I didn't even realize I had lost. But I also knew that this calm was just the break, because the next day, something happened that changed the course of everything once and for all. Something I never imagined I would see, not in my best dreams, not in my worst dreams. And that's what comes now, because the truth finally hit whoever needed to listen. In the weeks that came after that night at the door, I found myself experiencing something curious. While the storm in Kevin and Victoria's lives only increased, mine, for the first time in a long time, began to clear. Not because I did something, but precisely because I didn't do anything. And sometimes, my friend, silence is the loudest answer there is. I continued with my routine the way I always did. I woke up early, made my strong coffee, opened the kitchen window to let the smell of the garden in. Sometimes I would sit on the porch just watching the trees move, as if they were telling me secrets that I never had time to hear. It was a strange peace, a peace that came after a war that I never asked for, but that I won without raising my voice. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, and on social networks, the story took a different turn. Kevin and Victoria began a rebuilding campaign of sorts. They posted photos smiling, hugging, writing captions such as, "New beginnings, only love matters. The universe knows what it does." I looked at that and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, nothing. It was like watching two strangers trying to sell an image that no one else bought. And the world is not stupid. People commented between the lines, others made jokes, some dropped hints, and little by little the truth they tried to hide leaked out in small splashes, until it became a flood. One day, while I was cutting some dry branches in the yard, Ellis came walking up to the fence with the local newspaper folded in his hand. "Did you see that, Charles?" I said no. He turned the paper over and pointed to a modest but razor-sharp headline. "Executive marriage fails due to non-payment and contractual confusion." No names in the title, but it was enough to read 2 paragraphs to understand. The text spoke of suppliers who did not receive it, of a property in Tennessee that had tried to contact several times, of a couple who did not communicate and let everything fall apart. Ellis nodded slowly. "The world goes around, right?" I just replied, "Yes, I can. And sometimes it comes back slowly, just to teach better." But it didn't stop there. Some vendors began to subtly post that they had been mistreated by certain customers who tried to impose abusive terms. No one mentioned the name directly, but the whole city knew who it was. In quotes, a florist wrote, "Respect cannot be bought." Another posted, "Working with those who devalue your service is a hard but necessary lesson." I didn't look for these things, I didn't follow anyone, but still they came to me, as if the wind pushed the truth into my house. There was no hatred in them. There was simply a finding. And on Victoria's side, the fall came faster. A friend of my neighbor commented that Victoria had lost a contract with a cosmetics brand. She did advertising on the internet, lived off her image. The company did not want to associate her name with a case that became public gossip. "They say it was because of the repercussions of the wedding," the neighbor said. I didn't say anything. I just kept sweeping my yard. But inside I felt something that wasn't satisfaction. It was justice. Not the justice that screams, that exposes, that points the finger. It was silent justice. The one that comes when the world gives back exactly what the person delivered. As for Kevin, the truth was hitting even harder. I learned, not from gossip, but from someone from the old company where I worked, that some partners of his startup asked for explanations. They wanted to understand how such a centered executive had lost control of a public event, allowed contracts to be broken, exposed himself to negative comments. One of them even said, if he doesn't manage his own wedding, how will he manage the company's projects? I heard that and closed my eyes for a second, because I knew that kind of demand hurt more than any scolding of mine would have hurt one day. And I didn't move a finger. I didn't send a message. I didn't show a recording. I didn't publish anything. I didn't defend myself. I didn't attack. I just lived. It was almost as if the world was saying, rest, Charles. Now it's up to me. The days passed, and I allowed myself small pleasures that I had put aside. She made bread, as Elena did. He watered the plants with more patience. I sat on the porch just to listen to Nina Simone singing, I Put a Spell on You, letting the music fill the house as in the old days. Silence, this old companion became a friend again, not an enemy. And it was in this silence that I learned one of the greatest lessons that life has given me. Sometimes, what we don't say teaches more than any speech. My silence showed Kevin everything he needed to see. It showed that I would no longer be pushed, exploited, disrespected. It showed that for the first time in many years, I had chosen myself. But even with everything falling apart on the other side, something still needed to happen. Something I didn't expect, but that would completely change the course of this story. And it was just when I thought everything had calmed down, that life decided to surprise me once again. That night had a different silence, one of those that seemed to talk to us even without opening their mouths. The cold outside beat the windows like restless fingers, but inside the room, there was only the soft sound of the wood crackling. I lit the fireplace slowly, as I did when Elena was still with me, and sat in the armchair that has shaped my body over the years. On my lap, I put the envelope that had started it all, that absurd charge, that note written with the coldness of someone who forgot where it came from. I ran my finger over the yellowed paper on the edges from being folded and unfolded, and I felt that it no longer hurt. It was just paper, just a symbol, and a symbol we burn when we want to close a chapter. I opened the fireplace lid and let the fire lick the first end. The flame rose fast, hungry, turning the arrogance written there into a light ash. I didn't feel anger nor victory. Felt relief. A relief so deep that it almost made me want to cry. It was as if every inch of that paper carried the weight of years of silence, of guilt that was never mine, of expectations that slowly crushed me. When the last spark went out, I leaned back and looked at the picture frame shelf. Elena's face seemed to be watching me with that serene smile she always had when she knew I had made the right decision. I took the photo where she held Kevin in her lap. He was still a baby, chubby, snuggled in her as if the world was simple. And for the first time since all this storm, I didn't feel the cut of the memory. I felt only a warm, sweet longing, as if finally making peace with the past. I spoke softly, almost in a whisper, more to her than to me. Elena, I did as you taught me. I didn't let them step on who we were, not even in our history. The wood crackled loudly on the fireplace as if confirming my prayer. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And there, in that heat, I understood something that life had tried to teach me so many times. I didn't need to prove anything. I never needed it. Not for my son, not for the family he chose, not for the world that moves too fast to remember those who came before. My greatest victory was not to bring down his castle of illusions. It was not having lost myself trying to be accepted by those who discarded me without looking back. It was to have stood up, even broken. It was to have rediscovered my own dignity. I felt a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in years, as if I could finally breathe without carrying weights that weren't mine. The flame subsided. The embers shone small, and for a moment I believed that this was the end of everything, of the pain, of the confusion, of the history that consumed me for so many nights. But then, in the midst of the stillness, something came to me like a cold breath on the back of my neck, a strange feeling, that intuition that we learned to respect after living a lot. 'Cause even though I found my peace, something still needed to happen, something I didn't see coming. And that in a way would close the story in a way that not even I, with all this life lived, could predict. Today, when I remember that night in front of the fireplace, I feel as if I had left there not just a piece of paper, but a piece of the pain that accompanied me for so many years. After that moment, life went on with a smoothness that I didn't expect. Kevin and Victoria didn't show up at my door anymore, and I confessed that this was the best thing for all of us. I heard through other people's mouths that they had a small wedding, just to fulfill the formality, and that now they are trying to reorganize their lives away from the spotlight. Maybe they learned something. Maybe they didn't. The truth is that I stopped trying to control what no longer belongs in my hands. Today I wake up early, put the water to boil, and listen to the world wake up outside, without haste, without sorrow. I continue to take care of my garden, enjoying the company of neighbors who insist on stopping by to bring me some fruit, some homemade bread, some pros. And sometimes I think that in the end, what hurts is not the distance. It is the illusion that we need to deserve the love of those who chose not to love us as we deserved. Life has taught me, in its slow way, that dignity is not a medal, it is a path that we choose when we realize that we cannot live trying to fit into places that diminish us. This whole story left me with a lesson that I carry, as if it were Elena's voice whispering in my ear. We don't control the hearts of others, but we control the space we give them to hurt us. Love has never been currency, respect has never been a favor, and true presence never needed to be bought. If there's something I've learned on this journey, it's that no one loses because they're good. They just stop carrying the weight of those who don't know how to recognize. Life goes on, and it always rewards those who choose to go on with a clean heart, even after they have been hurt. My greatest victory was not seeing their castle crumble, but feeling my own heart finally stop asking for doors that will never open. And maybe you who are listening to me now know exactly what this is. That moment when we realize that forgiveness is not for the other, it is to free ourselves. I really wanted to thank you for staying with me so far. I keep thinking that, in this busy world, someone stopping to listen to an old man tell his story is already a very beautiful gesture. Your company makes me feel that nothing I have experienced has been in vain. If this story touched your chest on the other side, if it served to remind you that no one is alone in these curves of life, leave a like. This like is like a warm hug, one of those that hold our soul for a moment. And if you want to come back for another coffee with me, to listen to another memory, another confession, subscribe to the channel, so you will always have a place in my room, even if we are far away. Also tell me in the comments which city you are watching. I like to imagine where this story of mine is passing, what windows it is entering, what hearts it is beating, and it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. And before you go, let me tell you something. It doesn't end here. There's another piece of life waiting for you there on the screen. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear. Always remember, every wrinkle tells a story, and every story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.